Hello there, welcome to the Talking City podcast coming to you from the Manchester Evening News. My name is Joe Bray, joined by Simon Bajkowski, and it's been a bit of an interesting week. It was a lot of hype going into the FA Cup final. It just didn't quite deliver, but then we had the cathartic experience of a parade to brush off that FA Cup final defeat. We are going to discuss Wembley. We can't not discuss what happened at Wembley as much as City want to forget it. It felt like we were all just expecting a City win and it would be a double-double and a historic season. And, Eric Ten Hag's future was the main talking point as we were driving down to Wembley, and would he even survive the night, regardless of whether they won or lost. And then City didn't really turn up and United did, and it didn't go quite to plan.
Yeah, United have been a shambles all season and were even more shambolic going into the game with, report on the Friday saying that their, football controllers, part owners had decided to sack Eric Ten Hag regardless of the result. It felt like it was there for City to, like you say, to win and get the double-double and more history. And then they just played pretty bad. It was. Someone said it was the worst they'd seen them play in years, and I sort of thought it was still. I thought they still played better than, say, the FA Cup semi-final against Chelsea, but then at least they were kind of knackered from Real Madrid. I mean, there were questions for Guardiola afterwards, like, did they celebrate too much after the Premier League? It felt to me like they just put everything into the Premier League. And like last season, they won the Premier League and then they sort of tailed off and they weren't at the right level in the FA Cup final. They weren't at their level in the Champions League final, but they had enough to win. On Saturday, they just weren't at their level, and United were very, very good. United were better than they've been all season, really. And it proved too much for City.
Yeah, it's no surprise that journalists and fans covering United are sort of hailing that as the best performance of the season, but also where has that performance been all season? Because they finished 8th. They were sort of clinging on to this as a way to have some sort of success at the end of the season, and I think the way that they played makes you think, where was that performance if they'd played like that all season? Ten Hag wouldn't be in trouble as he is, but no, it felt to me like it was just one game too many. There was enough bad performances when Ortega, hero at Tottenham, comes out. Gvardiol, 5 goals in 7 games to get City on the brink. One heads over the other, and Garnacho has the easiest goal of his life. You just kind of know it's not going to be your day. And then the second goal, you've got Walker, you've got Stones. Both of them, I think, were a bit out of position or not quite picking up the man. And it was a fantastic pass from Fernandes. Great work from Kobbie Mainoo. But as much as it's a good goal for United to score, I think it's a really bad one for City to concede. And Guardiola on the touchline he just stood still for both goals. He just stood still, hands on hips, and he was absolutely furious and immediately sent Akanji and Doku to warm up. And when the team was announced, I think we were expecting Kovacic to come back in for Doku to add a bit of stability in midfield, but what we didn't expect was 2 new centre-backs. John Stones has been out of the team. He came back in from the cold. Ake potentially deserved a start, but he dropped Akanji and Diaz. And the fact that he then, at half-time, recalls Akanji suggests that he might have got that one wrong, and he said as much after the game, didn't he, that he got his tactics wrong.
Yeah, mate. Yeah, I mean, Akanji wasn't any better than Stones or Ake.
I thought it was really harsh on Ake to be subbed at half time as the one to go.
Yeah. I think he thought that, Kovacic and control would be the way to go, whereas in actual fact, once Doku came on, I've seen loads of compilations of how good Wan-Bissaka was, and loads of talk as if Doku was so bad at tackling. It was so bad at getting past Wan-Bissaka. Wan-Bissaka's brilliant at tackling. He stops him. It was like Doku had him on toast all half, really, and scored. But yeah, and I've seen loads of criticism of Walker for the second goal for not running back, and he doesn't. But neither does Rodri, and neither does a few others. Like it was a collective failure from City, and like you say, Guardiola and Ortega messing up for the first goal, and City were in control until the first goal. Maybe United still win the game if they don't get that gift of a first goal, but it was by no means kind of obvious that they would score before that. I was sat next to one of our colleagues who writes about United, and he just could not believe the United performance. As in, like, their problems all season have been laid out and exposed so much because they play with a low block and then a high press, and you have sort of 80 yards of space between your defenders and your forwards, whereas there were like 3 organized lines of United players between like 15 and 20 meters of each other. It was they were staggered by what they were seeing. And another of our colleagues was sort of asking, is this De Bruyne's worst game in ages? And you sort of like, probably not. I mean, he wasn't good. Neither was Foden. Neither was Haaland. Neither was anyone apart from Doku, really. So, but City didn't do enough with the ball and then gave goals away really cheaply.
And that's not really been the case. I think it was the first defeat in 35, first defeat of 2024, Rodri's first defeat in 74. This is not a normal occurrence, but this is why I think it just felt like one game too many. And Guardiola and Walker insisted that it wasn't, because they celebrated the Premier League. And I think Walker's comment was, if professional athletes can't recover 6 days after a night out, then no one else has any hope, which is probably a fair point. But yeah, I think it was a collective off day, and also United again were very good. And Guardiola always talks up United, doesn't he? He wants his players to know that they will be facing a good United side, and more often than not, United don't sort of play up their side of the bargain, but they did in this final. You could sort of see what it meant to them as well. It meant more to them to win that cup after the season they've had than City. And as we said on the way back, we were saying, if City were going to win one of these finals against United and lose one, you would much prefer to win the one that gives you the treble last season and lose this one where you've won the Premier League and there's not as much riding on it. There's a nice record on offer to do back-to-back doubles, but it's not the end of the world. It's not like you were so close to a treble and it was snatched away. I think last year's memories and the Gundogan goals and all of that was probably a bit more for City, and it felt like just at full time the players were a little bit shell-shocked. The fans just left. It felt like there was just an acceptance that it was like, fair enough, it wasn't our day. And when Haaland hits the bar and Alvarez is through and somehow side foots wide and you've got these chances, it's not like City didn't create. It's not like they were battered and United had loads and loads more chances. I can't really remember another clear-cut United chance apart from the 2 goals. I think it is just going to be chalked down to like a game that it just was not going to happen for City, but it still is a relatively good season. And I think that was why they went on the parade and tried to put it behind them and celebrate.
Yeah, you can only say this kind of once in a blue moon, but it felt like felt like City didn't want to win as much as their opponents did. Mm-hmm. Even at half time, United are 2-0 up, and it's their players who are like geeing the crowd up, wanting more as they're going off, and City are kind of trudging off. It felt like, it just wasn't the City we've seen that have won 3 trophies this season. And like I say, it just felt flat, like they'd put everything into the Premier League and they wanted a rest before the Euros. But it was, I could see why. I think there was a bit of concern from Guardiola about having the parade the next day if they lost, and they did lose. But at the same time, he more than anyone is a guy who says you have to celebrate what you've achieved, especially because sort of no one else is going to celebrate it for you. So it was the right thing to do, I think, to because they have made history. It's been a historic season. It's been a really successful season, and it shows how good City have become in that they, the FA Cup is deemed a nice bonus rather than sort of the be all and end all. But it's also how far sort of City have moved ahead of United that it was such a shock for United to win, and that has sort of like saved United's season because now they've got European football for next year, and may have saved Ten Hag's job. That is how big a win over City could be for him. So yeah, it was a disappointing Saturday for many, but then you've just got to put it in the big picture.
Yeah, and I was in the mix zone watching all the players leave, and it felt like City were just. I'm going to say it again. They were just a bit tired and a bit sort of ready to go on holiday, basically, and you can understand that to an extent. But then you see Sir Alex Ferguson and Jim Ratcliffe and all the United players and their families come in, and they were absolutely buzzing, and quite rightly, they just won the FA Cup. But it does feel like, I don't want to use the Trent Alexander-Arnold phrase, but it felt like it meant a bit more to United to win it. And like you say, City used to use the Carabao Cup as a sort of a way to get that feeling of winning that they then took into the Premier League and then into the Champions League, and they've got FA Cups along the way. I think that's what United will want to do on this trophy. City know how to win. They know how to win titles. They're winning all the time. And if you'd said to a City fan 10 years ago that they'd lose an FA Cup final and just be okay with it because they've won plenty of other stuff this season and in the last 12 months, I think that just shows how far they've come. And again, that's why there is the argument that you should celebrate the three trophies that you've had won and not let one final defeat take away from that. So yeah, I think you can tell by the way we're talking about it that it was just a bit of an anticlimax, really, wasn't it?
Yeah. It was a limp end to the season, and it was kind of nobody's fault. It was just an overall feeling across the team and the squad that seemed to be we haven't done enough. I mean, Guardiola came out after the game and said it was on him, and there's probably an element of that, but there also is an element of the players just needed to take responsibility for a performance that wasn't up there and good enough. And it's been a really, really long time since we can say that. Like you say, 34, 35 game unbeaten streak, and they've played very, very well. Even the Chelsea game in the semi that wasn't great had very obvious mitigating factors. It was just a case that City didn't turn up. But I would say, not to be sort of trying to put too much of a positive spin on it, but Guardiola's reached the semi-finals 7 times in 8 years. This is like 3 finals in 6 years, and he's won it twice. So sort of they are at the consistency where they want to be in the FA Cup, as they are the Premier League and the League Cup and the Champions League. So if you can be in a position where you get to within 1 or 2 games of winning a trophy in every competition you go for, then you, in the odds of probability, going to win at least 1 trophy every season.
And they're not relying on an FA Cup to make their season a success. And as you say, United have literally gone from one extreme to another, it feels like, just by winning the trophy. And that's not a sustainable sort of way of running a club. It might change, you never know, but at the moment it feels like they were very much reliant on winning that. Just before we go to a break, do you think there was an issue with celebrating the Premier League title on Sunday night and Monday?
No, like they're used to it. I think Walker said afterwards, didn't he, like, if you can't be ready to go again 5 or 6 days after celebrating, then you shouldn't be.
He also said it would be a downer. He was saying if they saved the celebrations for Saturday night when they were coming back from Wembley.
Yeah. Oh, you've got to.
What's the point?
Yeah, like this City team are used to playing as hard as they work, and they certainly did after the Premier League title win, but they had a few days off and then they came back. And, Guardiola on Friday, there was nothing from what he was saying to suggest a performance like that was coming because of how they'd been in training. He did say maybe we play bad, but he wasn't expecting anything like that because they had been switched on. So I think it was just one of those things where kind of they, nothing came for them, and everything came together for United.
Well, we'll talk about more of the partying after a break and the parade that followed 24 hours after the FA Cup final. And I think they needed it, but we'll discuss that in a second. Hello, welcome back to the Talking City podcast. Now, on Sunday, City took to the streets of Manchester again to show off their Premier League title, fourth in a row, and the Club World Cup and the Super Cup. And when you have those three trophies, it sort of underlines that, of course, you're right to show off those trophies. And it was a bit of a weird atmosphere. I'm not going to lie. I mean, my personal enthusiasm wasn't great for the parade, given I'd got back from Wembley at midnight the night before and it was my day off. But these are the things that you do. And there was a lot of City fans who were there and determined to enjoy themselves. And a couple of United fans walking by, reminding them of who won the cup. But there's other reminders of who's the European champions. And it was quite useful, I think, for City fans to show, and City to show that Manchester is still very firmly blue. It was sort of, I think thunderstorms were forecast. It didn't happen, but maybe that impacted on how many people were there. But there was still a very strong number of fans determined to see their heroes, and the players certainly enjoyed it. It silenced a few critics, I thought, Si, and from the outside, people were saying why they celebrating, they just lost the final. I think this is City doing what they wanted and reminding everyone that they've won this title, they've won it 4 years in a row, and they're going to come again, and they want to be going through the Dean's Gate next season doing exactly the same thing. I think it was a bit of a show of strength.
I think so. And I think a show of sort of the City identity and who City are as a fan base and a club. You sort of knew as soon as they called the parade that you were going to get, Arsenal fans criticising Liverpool fans saying, "Oh, we had far more numbers," and United fans saying, 99, whatever. And it was a short parade in terms of the route, and it was on sort of one long road, Deansgate, wasn't it? Which you can only have so many fans on that street. But I thought there were a good number of fans that turned out, and it wasn't so much about sort of showing everyone else in the world how many people had turned up, as it was sort of allowing these fans to celebrate with the players and to recognize these players that have given them another year of amazing football, and Guardiola. And it also coming after the FA Cup final defeat. I'm sure they would all rather have been celebrating the double, but oh god, I'll enjoy not having to say that soon. But I think it was important for the players and the staff coming after that disappointing defeat and sort of a bit of a slump of a defeat, to then be able to say, no, hang on a minute, we were the best team in England, we won the Club World Cup, we won the Super Cup, we've had another really good year. So City kind of are obviously bothered by the perception of themselves, but at the same time they sort of just they do things for themselves rather than for other people. And it was, I thought it was a nice event and turnout, really.
You can say that having sat at home and not waiting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But if you want to say it was awful, go for it.
I mean, I would have preferred to be at home with my family, but I know that looking at the faces of all the City fans, there was nowhere they would rather have been. it was, as you say, it was for City fans. And when we've had a go at Liverpool for saying it means more, and Arsenal for their sort of comments in the title race, those two clubs are talking to their own fans and no one else. This was City talking to their own fans and saying, we won this, we are the best in England, like you say, the best in the world, and we're going to celebrate it. And Foden went on the microphone and said, we want to win more, we want to be back next year. And Pep says we're going to win the FA Cup next year and take it back off United. And that is what City fans want to hear. And there was one street vendor who was selling 2021 parade flags, clearly trying to get rid of some old stock, but
Yeah.
that just underlines how many parades and success City have had. And it's like last year, if they'd lost the Champions League final, they'd have still won the double and they would have still probably had a parade, and they would have had the same questions. It's just because they won it in the end that it was this incredible event. And I think it doesn't take away from what City have done. And I think it's useful for the fans and the players to sort of end the season and sign it off on a high, rather than just trudge back from Wembley and go, oh well, it's, United have won, and give them the sort of the accolades and the bragging rights. But the back pages on Monday were filled with City, not United, and just those little things is just a reminder of where the power lies. Question I asked you on the way back: is this a successful season? One Premier League title, a Club World Cup and Super Cup, no FA Cup, no Champions League. I think a few weeks ago we were saying what would make a successful season, and we pointed to the Premier League as the minimum to be considered a success. Does it still feel like that, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the parade kind of reinforces that. And, we talk about whether to have a parade or not. Like, could you imagine if they'd not had a parade for winning the Premier League and winning the Club World Cup and Super Cup? Like, all this nonsense about them, all club bored by winning, and no one cares about them winning, and there's no feeling. Like, actually go down to things like the parade and see the fans enjoying it and the players enjoying it, and then kind of realize what achievements have been made and what people think of it. Because I don't think City and their fan base ever want to be getting to a point where they're sort of where winning a Premier League title is so normal that they don't mark it in any way, because it is enormous. And you think how good Arsenal have been and Liverpool have been this season. Like, it's been really, really hard. And winning the Super Cup in Athens and then coming back 3 days later to beat Newcastle, or 2 days later, I think they came back from Athens on the Thursday and played Newcastle Saturday. Like, that is really hard. But they did it and they got the result, and going away in the Club World Cup and then coming back just before Christmas. And it's it has been a gargantuan season. And the players have responded, and nobody knew how they would respond after winning the treble, and some have responded better than others. But you're talking about a season where De Bruyne has been absent for 5 months, Haaland's been absent for 2 months and then has had injury issues since. Jack Grealish has sort of fallen off a cliff with his performances. John Stones has given probably, I don't know, 3 weeks of good performances this season, as opposed to like 9 months last year. They've had a lot to deal with, and it's still small violin stuff, but it's all stuff that can make a big difference in an elite competition where you have very, very good teams who have been very, very well financially backed, and should be hungrier to win the title than City have been. Again, like parade, I've sort of seen like some fantastic scenes of parades around Europe, and like Bologna celebrating Champions League success and things like that. Like, anyone criticizing City's parade, well, nobody knows how your team would celebrate 4 Premier League titles in a row, because no one's ever done it. No one's ever done 4 English football titles in a row. So we're talking about unprecedented success, and there's a reason no one's done it before, because it's really, really hard. And yeah, I remember Roy Keane saying when City didn't win in 2020, like, winning 3 titles in a row is not for everyone. obviously Keane had with United and City hadn't. But City can now say winning 4 titles in a row isn't for everyone, and there's a good chance that nobody will ever be able to come back at them with that because of the scale of their achievement. There's a good chance that what City fans have seen over the last 4 years, no English football fan will ever see again. And so the season has to be seen as a humongous success.
There was so when the parade reached the end and there was the fireworks, and I was stood on the media platform, and fans quickly or sort of infiltrated that platform to get a better vantage point. There was 2 security people who were helpless, and as they were trying to usher these fans down to very little success, one fan said, "We're witnessing history. This might never happen again. We might get relegated." And he was joking to stay on this platform, but all the fans around him were saying, "Well, yeah." And he wasn't talking about the charges. He was like, "This is a historic moment," and it was a bit tongue in cheek, but the point stands, doesn't it? I think these fans know that this is a massively historic season that they've just seen, and like you say, if winning 4 in a row is not for everyone, no one's done the double before, and maybe City showed why, because it's so hard to just get yourself up for that cup final again, even against your biggest rivals. So I think looking at the faces of those fans and the scenes, and there was a lot of young fans as well, they were right to parade, and they were right to show why they've had such a successful season. Earlier in the parade, there was one, or sort of a non-comment from Pep. He was asked, "Can you stay forever?" Which I thought, after weeks of us journalists sort of beating around the bush and trying to get a different angle on his future, just to ask him outright, "Can you stay forever?" was one way of doing it. And he just laughed nervously and sort of avoided the question. And we've seen reports that he's now going to call time on his City career next summer, and the expectation is that he will sort of leave next summer. We're now a year before the end of his contract. It's going to be a year of, will he stay, won't he stay, who could replace him, this sort of thing. And I think the parade was a bit of a turning point of, okay, this is the new reality of potentially the final year of Guardiola.
Yeah, he could not have looked more horrified at that question. Sort of like, are you expecting an answer from me, or can I just sort of slink
It's an
off?
impossible question to answer, isn't it?
Yeah. And then obviously during the parade, sort of a story drops from the Mail that Pep's expected to leave next year, and you speak to people close to Pep, and you speak to people elsewhere in football, and the expectation is that Pep will be off at the end of his contract next summer. But we can only say he's expected to leave because no decision has been made, and he still hasn't decided. And you're talking about a guy who still has kind of the perfect football ecosystem for him to thrive in, and who has signed 3 contract extensions previously at City. He never thought he'd be at City for 9 years. Nobody thought he would be at City for 9 years, but he has. So because of that, there is still every chance that he signs for 10 or 11 years. It's just that at the minute, he is, as he said, after they won the league, he's closer to leaving than he is staying. But, he also said after they won the league that, I don't know how I'm going to motivate the players for next year, but I'm sure when we all come together, we'll find a way. And maybe, what the City owners have been very good at, what the chairman has been very good at, is kind of leaving Pep to be Pep, and then just finding the right moment to say, listen, how about staying?
Yeah, I think it's. I was looking at him in the 95th minute at Wembley, and he was trying to get the crowd up for it. That wasn't a man lacking motivation, and even at the parade, he was thoroughly enjoying himself and leading the chants, smoking his cigar. And I think, as ever, a summer where he can just recharge and go back to Barcelona and watch the Euros and just relax a bit, I think will benefit him. And yeah, like you say, history would suggest that he honours his contracts, and then that will be when he decides to go or not. He won't leave before that. But yeah, the closer we get, and as he says, he could leave, and I think next summer is going to be a massive one, which we've talked about, and I'm sure we'll talk about again. But yeah, it's just when his face when he was asked that question was a picture, and he didn't seem best pleased. But again, how do you answer that? Because he clearly loves City and will always be a fan, but he isn't going to stay forever. And I think City fans know that, and as that date gets closer and the possibility, I remember 2 years ago where it was like every week we were asking him in a press conference, "Are you staying?" And he just didn't have an answer, not publicly anyway. And he will decide when he decides, and then we'll find out, and we'll go from there. We'll be back after a short break, and we'll look back on the season with a few awards and memories of what has been, as we say, a very successful campaign. Hello, welcome back to the Talking City podcast. Now, Simon, I'm hoping you got my email with these
Yes.
categories of end of season awards that I'm going to ask you about right now. Just go through sort of player of the season, moments of the season, that sort of thing. A few traditional awards, a few less so. I think the player of the season award will be quite a small conversation. So, have you got an answer other than Phil Foden?
Well, this is the thing. I sort of got your email, and I can kind of work out who you're going to pick. So, I might try and offer a bit of variation.
Should we do a player of the season without Phil Foden category?
Well, I mean, I think there is an argument to say that Rodri is City's player of the season. The only 3 league matches they lost were essentially because they didn't have Rodri in the team. Unbeaten and, still just so influential whenever he plays. And you saw that even on the final day of the Premier League season, coming up with an important goal. He's added a few more goals and assists. He's still kind of knocking out these performances, even though he's not got the rest that he pleaded for last summer. Surely they will sort of bring someone to lighten the load a little bit next season, because he can't keep going. However, Foden has been the one who has stepped up and won games and won the league for City. I don't think you can argue with him being player of the season, given his importance, particularly from December onwards, from when they returned after the Club World Cup.
Yeah, I think Rodri has been consistently very good, and even to score on the final day and settle all those nerves is another massive goal from him, which is sort of becoming his trademark of the sort of not the big goal on the final day, but an important one. But no, I think Foden had that consistency, but also even more bigger goals and bigger performances. And when City was struggling just for a bit of rhythm and momentum in maybe January, February, he was the one who was taking games and scoring the goals and turning a 1-0 deficit or a 0-0 into quite a comfortable win. And he's continued that with some massive goals at Real Madrid and on the final day. And this is the year where he's really stepped forward. I put second Akanji rather than Rodri. I just think Akanji's been
that is controversial
there, and I'm ignoring the fact that he slipped against Tottenham. Maybe if there was an unsung player of the year, it might be Akanji, because he's managed to keep every other defender out of the team at any given point of the season. He's put himself ahead of Diaz and Stones in the running at centre back, which you wouldn't have said a year ago, but then he did start in the Champions League final, and he's just always there and always 7 out of 10. And I think to win the title and to do that, and it was the fact that he was keeping Diaz out, which was, again, one of the best defenders City will ever have. And you've got Akanji who's worth 14 million, just putting in these performances. I don't think he is the player of the season, but I think he's certainly top 3. And this is before we start talking about Erling Haaland as well and how many goals did he score.
Yeah, I think I'd probably put Akanji 3 and Ake 4 in the rankings.
Okay.
For all of those reasons, I thought Ake was sort of just had another stellar year. He's just so composed on the ball, and like you said earlier, I thought it was harsh on him to be taken off at half time in the FA Cup. But again, like both of them, and Akanji gets more credit because he only cost 14 million, but Ake for 40 million from Bournemouth in 2020 was sort of just seen as, here's Guardiola shelling more money at a defence that can't defend. Ake was seen as small. He never won any aerial duels. Playing in a Bournemouth team that got relegated that year, I think. So it was, and Chelsea had an option to buy him and weren't interested in bringing him back to Chelsea. So it was like, it was just seen as kind of another needless City transfer, and he didn't have a good first year. But Pep sort of took him to one side and he was like, I still believe in you. I know why we bought you. You can crack on. And he's gone from strength to strength, and he's just such a classy defender.
And he's another one who's sort of been locked out at left back, which is where he got all his minutes last year. And this year he's again kept Diaz and Stones out at any point of the season, and he will have looked at that final day lineup against West Ham and felt really hard done by not to be in there, probably because he picked up a little bit of an injury, did he, in the couple of weeks beforehand to lose his place. If he kept fit, there's an argument to say he would have kept his place for that final day. And the defence has gone through a real shake up this season. I think it was so set last year to the point where the chant running through the back line was pretty much every week was, this is what the back line's going to be, and now it's maybe not. And potentially this leads us on to a young player of the season vote, which I was fairly confident would say Josko Gvardiol, who's been fantastic since coming in. I suppose Phil Foden is just too old for a young player now, but Gvardiol's come in at 21, massive price tag, looked a little bit shaky at the start, but to take on all the lessons and all the training and start the running as the left back, score all those goals, score big goals, start FA Cup final and final day, I think he's been really good. And if this is Gvardiol still with a lot to do to improve defensively, as the FA Cup final showed, then he's going to be some player going forward. And City said he was signed for the next decade. It's going to be a pretty impressive decade if this is the first year where there was no pressure on him.
Do you know what? Gvardiol wasn't on my radar at all for Young Player of the Year. And I think it's because he looked 28. Because he settled so quickly. It's sort of like, oh yeah, this is an experienced guy, come with loads of experience, Champions League experience, World Cup. You do forget just how young he is. I would also say with Gvardiol that it wasn't really till April that it really hit. Like you sort of felt it in February, March. He was doing well, but I remember the game against Arsenal at home on at the end of March, and Kyle Walker's injured, John Stones is injured, Nathan Ake goes off injured. Like nobody was saying, oh, but they've got Gvardiol, so they'll be fine. It was like, oh, this isn't the best City defense. This is, this is missing like 3 of the best defenders in the City defense here. Gvardiol really hadn't made his mark, and when I watched him in the FA Cup final, I sort of thought back to his first derby at Old Trafford in October, and he was terrible. He was so just jumpy and giving the ball away. It really did take him a while to get what Guardiola wanted from the position. He didn't feel comfortable playing left back, but sort of at some point in January, February, it just started to click. And in typical City style, as soon as it clicked, it was better than everything else in the league. It is, we've raved for a long time about John Stones and the hybrid role that was sort of brought up for him last year. It is ludicrous what Guardiola has done to Gvardiol. Turned this commanding, imposing centre back into a marauding left winger. It is mad. But all the, well, you've got to credit the manager, obviously, but so much credit has to go to the player at such a young age to be able to do that.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of times where Guardiola was in the squad or in the lineup, and you're thinking, "Oh, is he? Why is he ahead of Ake and what's he doing?" But Guardiola has clearly seen something and persisted, and if anything, he's given him sort of the pat on the back treatment for so long, and then he started playing well in attack, and suddenly Guardiola is having to go at his defensive positioning and that sort of thing, and it seems like there's a pretty healthy relationship between the two, and the manager knows exactly what to do to get the best out of the player, and just the games that he's played in the big games and the trust that he's got is quite impressive. If he wasn't on your radar, who is your young player?
Jeremy Doku was going to shade it from Oscar Bob. Doku had a very poor start, or poor first game, and then second game he was dynamite at West Ham. And then I think there was a game where he got 4 assists at home to Bournemouth and scored as well. And then he kind of didn't get any more assists until March or April or something like that. And sort of those concerns that were there when he signed about what would his consistency be, what would his end product be, rose to the fore. And he didn't give the team what Jack Grealish gave the team when he played, and they didn't look as good. But in the sort of since March, he's been terrific, and he's largely been a substitute. But, coming on at Anfield to change the game with Kovacic when City were right up against it, he was brilliant. He's been just so good whenever he's come off the bench, and, right up until the end when nobody else turned up in the FA Cup final, there was Doku kind of brilliant from the start, with his pace, with his skill, creating chances, causing havoc. Doku, even more than Gvardiol, I would say, is probably the one player you look at and think, my God, he could be phenomenal next season.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've spent a lot of time on this podcast wondering where he fit into the team. Is he a Guardiola player? Has he got any end product? There was a time where you were saying he's not assisted Haaland once, and we were a fair chunk into the season, and you're thinking if you're a winger, your job is to get the ball into the box, but it kept going over his head or behind him or in front of him, and he's another one like Guardiola where it's clicked. At some point in the last few months, it's really clicked, and I remember, like you say, he came on at Anfield and we're looking at each other like he is the last player you need, because he's going to sort of give the ball away, give the transitions to Liverpool, and what he actually did was keep the pressure on at the other end, and maybe nearly gave away a penalty, but his impact and his contributions when he's come on have been really important, and he won the penalty at Tottenham that turned a 1-0 where City have just conceded a massive chance into a 2-0 and City win the game. And yeah, I think Doku is going to be very, very dangerous next season. I think he's potentially going to have a really good Euros, but it's also quite impressive to keep Jack Grealish out of the side. And Grealish has had his issues this season and fitness and all that sort of thing. But part of the reason Grealish hasn't been able to have a run of games to rediscover his form is because of Doku and the final day. Guardiola wants someone to keep the pressure on and attack against West Ham, and he calls Doku instead of Grealish, and that says a lot as well. So yeah, I think if they could share that award, Guardiola and Doku. But you would also say 2 of the summer signings that people were not too fussed about and went under the radar. City spent a lot of money, but not players that they knew a lot about. You're looking back 12 months on and thinking, yeah, these are 2 very shrewd signings. You would have to say. The next one I've got is goal of the season. What would you say for the goal?
Phil Foden.
West Ham or United?
Any of them.
Or
I mean, West Ham,
United,
Real Madrid were certainly all identical. There's probably more. I mean, there was the one against Villa that got his hat trick that was sort of Rooney-esque for arguing and then just smacking it in the net. But the United, West Ham and Real, that way of just like the body shape to receive the ball, let the ball come across, the cushion first touch with the left, and then the impossibly good strike with so little backlift. It goes into the side netting. Like, that is how good it is and how impossible it is to stop. And it is becoming a trademark goal. And all three of those goals were hugely important moments that tell the tale of Foden and City's season. So, I mean, I can't separate them because they're all the same strike. But what a strike to have in your locker, to be able to just produce more than once a season, like 3 times in as many months. It's frighteningly good.
Not just 3 times when you're 4-0 up. It's
Yeah,
to take a derby away from United when it was pretty tense at the time, to score at the Bernabeu, and then on the final day, 2 minutes in, when City had been there and not taken control of these games and let the control go away from them, and he's like, no, do you know what, I'm just going to do it. And for a while he's loved that position where he can get it onto his left foot and shoot either into the far post or sometimes in the near post. He scored some good goals, but to perfect that strike, like you say, into the top corner, and that final day, you the whole stadium was saying shoot. They knew what he was going to do. He knew what he was going to do.
yeah.
But to then do it and not find Rose Ed, because if he'd done
It,
that, you're like, oh, come on, the nerves are getting to City. They need to just keep it calm. To pull a strike like that out it's just ridiculous. And a player of playing with so much confidence.
I hate such comparisons, but it is, I would dare to say, genuinely sort of Messi-esque, that level of, he can take the ball and put it on an absolute postage stamp, and everyone knows where the ball is going to go in the back of the net, but where it's going to go, and nobody can do anything about it because it's just too good for anyone. And I would say kind of he beat his previous best goal scoring tally by a long way, but his previous best was in 2021, I think, 2021. And the last 2 seasons, he's not been great with his finishing. There's been something that feels like it's, and his sort of most known trait has been kind of like dragging the ball across past the far post and out when it should have gone in, that kind of thing. But you see, like, the work that has gone in on the training ground to that finish that he does. He's worked, like, he has so much talent, but he's also works incredibly hard. Everyone talks about him being the last off the training pitch. He stays behind after training to do extra work, and yeah, it's paid off. And hopefully we might be seeing that strike a few more times over the summer.
Well, yeah, imagine if he gets one of them in the Euros final, assuming they get that far. I would say if Foden's 3 goals are 1, 2, and 3 on the list, then maybe the 3 goals at Newcastle are 4, 5, and 6, because they were all very good goals for different reasons. And that leads us on to moment of the season. I wasn't at Newcastle for Oscar Bob's goal. I would say maybe Foden against West Ham, just for the noise and the elation and everything. But it's got to be Ortega against Spurs, because the title flashed before City's eyes, and he came on and Edison had gone off and not been happy about it, and that it was sort of the moment, and coupled with then the penalty and the celebrations in that way, and I think that was the defining moment of the season. When you're looking for a title moment, Foden's goal is great, but I think it doesn't happen without Ortega.
Yeah, it's good. There's so many moments to think about. Yeah, Ortega, brilliant. Oscar Bob at Newcastle was the moment that I think a lot of people look back on and say, that is where we had the belief to win the league. Because City really were sort of deserving to be 2-1 down. And then it was the Kevin De Bruyne show. And De Bruyne came on and scored a stupidly good goal, sort of p-rolled along the floor, but so accurate. It crept into the far corner. And then Newcastle are happy in injury time. They're sat back. They've got De Bruyne sort of 50 yards out. No ball is on. And he finds an incredible ball over the top for this rookie 20-year-old in his first season of Premier League football to make the run in behind Kieran Trippier, control the ball exquisitely with his first touch, and then have such fantastic feet. You know, we talk about Foden having the sort of poise to do what he's doing at such important moments in the game, but he's like been part of this squad for 6 years. For Oscar Bob to produce that moment was unbelievable.
It was like
And
he
I
was playing
think,
on the park, wasn't it? Not
yeah,
at St
yeah,
James's Park and the
and
last minute of the game.
for all the sort of Cole Palmer talk, Cole Palmer's had an incredible season, but without Cole Palmer going, Oscar Bob doesn't happen, and Oscar Bob has really, really stepped up this season. And the only other moment I would add is Guardiola's goal at Real Madrid, because that was kind of team news came out at Real Madrid, De Bruyne ill, and it felt like nothing was quite going their way. It felt like, whereas last year they were all about control and they were in control, it felt like just something wasn't there this season. And it was a similar feeling all season. And then Bernardo scores the early goal and you think, oh, they could really do it again. But then Real take control. But then in 5 minutes for Foden's score, I don't know what it was. I think it was about 75. And then Guardiola nets this incredible goal, his first goal for the club, I think it was, on his weaker right foot from outside the box. And you suddenly think, are Man City going to knock Real Madrid out of the Champions League again for a second year in a row? Are they going to win the treble again? That, and especially because a few days later, then they beat Luton and Arsenal and Liverpool lose, and then it's kind of really, really on. Yeah, Guardiola's goal was certainly pretty special.
Yeah, I'll give you that. That was, I think, because it was such a surprise. It was like we've seen
Yeah,
Foden score this goal, and then hang on, I remember sort of writing, "Oh, there's been a goal," and then I was like, "Wait, was that Gvardiol on his right foot from the edge of the area?" It was sort of one of those moments where you double check what you've actually just seen. Next one I've got is surprise of the season, which could be a player, a moment. I've gone for Rodri's red card against Forest because it came directly after half time. You don't expect a player like that to do that, and just because of then what happens after where they don't win any of the 3 games that he misses, it felt really out of the blue and really derailed the season at the time. I can't really think of any other, maybe Erling Haaland's inexplicable miss against United at, I think, at the Etihad, where he balloons it over the bar from underneath it. But yeah, I think Rodri's red card, and Guardiola just wouldn't look at him and was amazed that he was stupid enough to do that.
yeah, yeah. I mean, obviously Rodri was a big deal. It was quite a disappointing sort of moment for him personally to have lost such control, but then it really did hurt the team. Yeah, I mean, I suppose there's been a lot of surprise defensively, both in the terms of Guardiola is not a rampaging left back, so how has that happened? That was kind of probably the biggest tactical surprise of the season. But then also, you know, as we were sort of talking in the final few weeks of the season, like John Stones and Ruben Diaz can't get into this team, and that was something that I don't think anyone expected. You know, it showed the level of Akanji and Ake, but also just, you know, showed that no one's place is sacred in this City team.
Yeah, I think that was. I don't know. Surprise feels a bit negative, doesn't it? But there are a lot of positive surprises in that. Doku's been a lot better than expected, and things like that. But no, I think for if there was a moment that made me think, wow, what's just happened? As yeah, obviously Haaland's miss was just a crazy miss on his part. But now I think it then comes out that Rodri's going to miss Arsenal, and the implications of what's happened sort of emerge after the fact. And yeah, that's why I plump for that. This is definitely a negative one, a flop or disappointment of the season. Again, could be player or I mean, I've gone for Calvin Phillips because I feel like flop is quite an appropriate word for the way his season's gone, and it ties into that Rodri red card because he came out and said he's been waiting for an opportunity to show what he can do, and it's the biggest week of his City career, and he turned down opportunities to leave in the summer to show that he's not just a player who stays at City for a year and it doesn't work out and leaves, but I think he plays a full game at Newcastle, doesn't do anything and they lose, and then he's not in the squad again, and he's out on loan. It's just been a pretty poor. It comes down to that week where he couldn't take that opportunity, and when Guardiola says he can't envisage Phillips in his team, and the only way he does is when he wants chaos, is pretty damning, and he's not really kicked on after that, and looks like he's played his final game.
Yeah, I think Phillips is disappointing because it kind of could be seen, and sort of if other people could see it, why couldn't Phillips? Admirable in the summer to decide I want to stay at City and fight for my place. But you watch the first pre-season game and Mateo Kovacic is 10 times better than him in that holding midfield role and looks to have sort of more sort of synergy already in the midfield. And you think, well, is it the right decision to stay? And it wasn't the right decision to stay. And then it wasn't the right loan move to West Ham, and it all went pear-shaped. And, it's still a bit inexplicable how Phillips has just fallen off a cliff over the last 2 years. But after the first year went so badly, I think it was difficult to see him turning it around to sort of, so it was kind of a surprise with what he did. The only other one I would say is probably Mateus Nunes, who has shown unbelievable potential. Looks very much a Guardiola player in some respects, but just hasn't shown any level of consistency that means he has made a big impact in his first season. And, similar to Phillips not taking his opportunity in that week, Nunes started at Wolves, his former club, and was hooked after 45 minutes. And I don't think he started another league game for a few months. He played in Belgrade, and I think he played quite well, but he just did some stuff. I remember tweeting he's shown he's not going to start, a significant game for some time now, and got absolute dox abuse for it with people saying I was being negative. And lo and behold, he barely started any games for City over the rest of the season. I think the one in the last 15 that he started was Luton at home. So there is.
You can't see where he would start any games either. Or
No,
come on, and you can't see a situation where he would come on and add to the team, which isn't
no.
great.
Yeah, so he's got the potential as a footballer that he could be amazing next season, and the fact that he's been left out of the Portugal squad for the Euros means that he could have a pre-season working with Pep and everything clicks. But the fact he's been left out of the Euro squad for someone from the Saudi Pro League tells you what a disappointing season he's had, and the fact that his future at the club isn't certain after just 1 year also speaks to a pretty disappointing season.
I think that's fair. Let's get back to some positivity. Team performance of the season, so a performance from City. There's a lot of recency bias. I think Real Madrid away was a very good performance, but they did concede 3 goals. I think Brighton away was something where everything clicked. I think Fulham, where just the attitude and the way that they were fighting for that title, I thought was really impressive. But I've gone for Chelsea in the FA Cup, even though it was a really bad performance, just to do what they did after going out against Madrid and just hanging in there, doing what they needed to do to win when everything was going against them. I think that was a performance that helped them win the league. So I think just for the significance of it, I've gone for, strangely, a really bad performance as the best performance of the season.
Yeah, I think that's fair. There's a few just kind of glancing back through the season. Newcastle win at home early on was probably along the same lines as the Chelsea FA Cup one. They win at Luton after they lost at Aston Villa in December. I thought they played really well at Luton and were unfortunate to be behind, and then rallied well. And that was the first game without Haaland as well. So sort of players knew that they had to step up, and Alvarez and Foden and Bernardo and Grealish did. And Also, Everton, first game after the Club World Cup, they went behind and came back, and that was really a really good team performance. But then also, later on in the season, like Brighton and Fulham were really good.
Another one I'd say is the Club World Cup final, where they really wanted to win that and went ahead in the first minute, and Fluminense were very, very good and were a different side completely to anything City have faced. But City went and won 4-0 and became world champions. What about individual performances? I think Foden takes a lot of these, because there was a period where against Everton he turned that game around on his own. There was, I think, Bournemouth away where he got the only goal, Brentford away he got a hat-trick, West Ham at home on the final day. I would probably potentially go Kevin De Bruyne at Newcastle, though, just coming off the bench and changing it as he did. That was a real individual performance.
Yeah, I think you could feasibly pick either De Bruyne at Luton or Haaland at Luton for the 6-3 to end up 6-2. Yeah, but I'd probably side with Foden, probably at Brentford. 3 sort of different goals that he scored, but another very good hat trick. I think it's mostly Foden with a smattering of De Bruyne and Haaland.
This is it. We barely talked about Haaland, and he scored a lot of goals again. I looked at his record. He's got 98 appearances for City, 90 goals and 15 assists over 2 seasons, which is completely absurd.
Decent, yeah.
He might cut it in League One next season if he gets a step up. Finally, game of the season, in terms of a game you've been to that you just thoroughly enjoyed. I'll let you go first.
This is really interesting because I saw that Sky had done this, and all 5 pundits had plumped for Chelsea 4, City 4 from November, and I was like, really? And I don't know why, because like it was a brilliant game. I sort of don't. It was a thrilling game, that game, but it was also a game where City kind of really didn't play that well or handle the game well. And I think, all credit to Mauricio Pochettino, who just has a way of making, playing through City's system and making them squirm. But I think I prefer it when 2 teams play well and 2 teams kind of, go up against each other. And for that reason, I would go for either the 3-3 draw with Real Madrid or the 1-1 draw at Anfield. Because I feel like at Anfield, City played really maturely and then smartly. And then Liverpool reacted and were better in the second half and really put City under the storm, and Ederson had to go off injured after conceding the penalty, and Ortega was needed to make a load of good saves, and then City reacted again, and that 1-1 for me was so much better than, say, City 0, Arsenal 0, or Arsenal 1, City 0, where there was just like a lack of ambition really from both teams. I thought the Liverpool game was just really great.
Yeah, we came away from that thinking that was just two teams at their very best, wanting to beat each other, playing their own styles, trying to figure the other side out, and either side could have won it. There was a penalty shout at the end, but it was one way you didn't really want it to end. And I think, those are the 2 that I was going to lean towards. Probably the Real Madrid one, just for the quality of the goals. Bernardo doing it, getting that long range in the first minute. Real Madrid hit back with 2 goals on the break. The Valverde goal to bring it back to 3-3 afterwards. It was just the quality on show there was just incredible. And I was really hoping it'd be the same in the second leg. It's a different kind of game, which is another really good game in the second leg, but it was a bit more nervous and tight. But I think the Bernabeu one was probably pips it for me. I think that's the end of our categories. I'm sure we could have thought of a few more, but it shows that it's not been too bad a season.
No, a lot of memories and a lot of highlights. Yeah, another very good season.
So yeah, anyone who tells you City are boring, show them this last 20 minutes or so, because
Yeah,
we could prove that there's been quite a lot of not so boring things on show this season. So that's it for the season. Should be back over the summer. Back, it's not too long before the pre-season begins in July in the United States. So we'll be there for that. And any transfer news, any news on Pep Guardiola's future, we will have it here on the Talking City podcast and over the summer on the Manchester Evening News. Give us a like and subscribe and a follow if you can on social media. You know where to find us. Enjoy your season off and enjoy being Premier League champions. Thanks for joining us.